everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Production Value. I'm Naomi. I am very excited today because I am getting to absolutely dismantle the brain of one of my favorite people who is so talented, it's out of control. I have with me the composer of Rick and Morty, my friend Ryan Elder. Ryan, how are you? Hello, welcome.
Hey, Naomi, thanks for having me. I'm good. I don't know if I want my brain dismantled, but maybe, lightly deconstructed. How about we start there?
Picked apart, put back together again. I will, I won't, what's when you leave nature,
Oh, yes. Leave
no
it as you
trace.
found it.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Leave no trace on my brain, please.
Oh man, thanks for being here, Ryan. It's so nice to not only catch up, but to get to finally talk about things that I have been dying to know about you for so long. So thanks for your consent.
Happy to be here. It'll be fun.
Ryan, let's start off. The fact that I had this moment when I think we were first interacting where we were doing something for some online stream, and I was like, oh yeah, here's Ryan. I was like, great. I was like, Ryan. And I went to your Twitter and I was like, why am I on a Skype call with the composer for Rick and Morty? This is stupid and hilarious and insane. But you have been a working musician for far longer than just Rick and Morty, and you've been a composer, and I cannot wait to talk about it. So I think we should start at the very beginning, which is why music? What made you want to be a composer? I was a music kid. I didn't want to be a composer. Where does it start?
Yeah.
Where does it begin?
It's a lot of little things that came together, but I started playing violin when I was 5. So my family's very musical. My mom plays piano and dances, and my dad was like into recording and songwriting and stuff. So my dad had like a home studio when I was a kid. Wow. And when I was like 6, he was teaching me how to use MIDI and like sync keyboards and drum machines together. And he was one of the like very few people in the like consumers in the US who had MIDI capabilities on his IBM 8086 in the 80s. It was like you put in the floppy disk and and it was pretty cool to me as a kid, like, oh, I'm actually like get to make songs, even though they were terrible. And like I made like a boy band song and my dad was very proud of me. So I got a lot of support in terms of kind of doing whatever I wanted with music and, learning violin and growing up. And I was in bands in high school, of course. And that was always really fun, songwriting. But it wasn't until I did my internship after college that I really understood what media composing was. Cause I didn't, when I got an internship at a recording studio, I thought it was going to be like, they were going to be making records. Like I showed up the first day thinking they were making records, but no, they made music for commercials. So I was like, well, let's go with this. And I started off wanting to be an engineer, but I quickly realized like trying my hand at writing music for commercials that it was like fun, really fun. So my bosses there brought me on after my internship as like a dub room assistant, it was called. And this was 2001. So we were still driving 3/4-inch tapes all over LA, getting a quarter per mile in mileage reimbursements and stuff like that. And, dubbing so many like CDs and VHS tapes to mail overnight to New York to our clients in New York and stuff. So I was doing that. And on the side, like after hours, I would get in the studio if nobody was in there and kind of work on trying my hand at commercials. And pretty soon after starting there, I sold a commercial to Nestle Juicy Juice, Hamster Plays Soccer. It's my first ever final on the air commercial. And then they eventually, like I proved myself enough where they brought me on as a full-time composer instead of just a dub room assistant.
What do you, I worked in like pharmaceutical commercials for a little bit as an intern. And I remember digitizing tapes that they had in the storage room. And it was just done so differently because there were
barely anyone delivered digitally over the internet when I first started. I mean, it was a long time ago, obviously, but by the time I was done doing commercials, it was all digital. I remember like thinking, oh, because there was this courier guy that would come every night and he was super nice and funny. And he worked for Advanced Express, I think. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, this guy's going to be out of work. I feel terrible because we just stopped using them basically. Like in 1 year, we went from using them every night to never, ever sending physical media. It was crazy. But let's talk about pharmaceutical commercials, because some of my favorite composer stories on commercials are about pharmaceuticals. I don't know if you know this, but the section where they like list all the side effects?
Yeah.
That's called the fair balance section. Like that's like their legal term for it. And there's so many laws about what they can do in that section. You probably know this.
Vaguely. I mean, it was like a while ago at this point. Actually, 10 years ago.
Musically, we were not allowed to be too upbeat in those sections. The music had to be like as neutral, because they didn't want it sad, obviously, or like upsetting, but it had to be neutral. So many, I worked on so many of those, and it was always like, okay, the fair balance is too upbeat, it's too happy. Our lawyers are saying we got to come back and redo this. So there's all this like creatively, we had to be so like neutral during those. And sometimes I'll see one now and I'll be like, oh, it's too happy. How did they get away with it?
The BPM is too high. I just knew that you could speed it up to a certain extent. So, obviously when somebody's talking fast and so they can speed it up to a certain extent. I remember things like that they couldn't show. Like I worked for a company that made commercials for like AbbVie and a lot of like ulcerative colitis and psoriasis, plaque psoriasis.
Okay, yeah.
Like this is my glamorous intermediate intern.
I bet we worked on the same ad, because I worked on a ton of plaque psoriasis commercials. I don't remember the brand, but.
And it was like, you couldn't show us, it had to be a certain percentage of better. It couldn't be 100%.
Yes.
Like there's
totally
so many legal issues with pharmaceutical commercials, which is why I think it's so funny that like the internet kind of broke it in a way. Remember the whole Kim Kardashian, like she was doing pharmaceutical commercials via her Instagram, and it just
I didn't know about this.
It was like chaotic because everyone was like, you can't, this is not how any of this works. Which I'm sure she doesn't mean to, but whatever pharmaceutical
when you do an ad on
go
Instagram,
for it.
You get paid. So you're like, I'm not going to say anything medium about the product, much less bad. So it's going to all be positive. That's so funny.
What do you think your internship taught you? Because I do think that the right people will actually take something away from their media internship, because you are getting coffees and you're schlepping things around all the time. But I think if you are listening and watching, you learn so much that later influences your career.
It's actually almost impossible to quantify. I did the internship, no joke, for only 3 months, but there's a couple of things I took away from it in retrospect, mainly. In the moment, I don't know if I would have been able to articulate this, but the first thing is like internships are definitely a young person's game, because you have to say yes to everything. You literally have to be a yes person. You cannot go, oh, well, I was hoping to go out to dinner with someone tonight. I can't stay and work on this. Like I literally just gave my life to them for 3 months. And that attitude is what, I mean, it's terrible. I know that's like, there's a lot of talk these days of like, don't do that kind of thing. Especially for me, it was an unpaid internship.
Oh my God.
But I knew like, first of all, I'm a pleaser. I like to make, when people want things of me, I like to make them happy. So I just work my ass off. And the second thing that I think I took away from it is that so much of your later success in your career is going to be determined by who you can make friends with. And I made my bosses and the owners of the company like me as a person. They found me fun to be around. And one of my bosses, like I really owe him a lot, because he was one of the owners of the company, Corbin Krause. He was a producer, and we became such good friends that when after my internship, I went back to Minnesota and I was working at Mars Music, which is like Guitar Center. And Corbin happened to come to Minnesota, and he like made it a point to have lunch with me, which, I'm like a 22-year-old kid. who just getting started or whatever. And for whatever reason, he really liked me. And I think like, I don't know if I could have articulated this at the time, but being someone who was fun to hang out with and like game for anything was just like so huge. Like, yeah, there's all the technical stuff I learned, how to use Pro Tools, stuff like that, that obviously I use on a daily basis. But I think like just sort of holistically speaking, like it's about attitude is so much more important than technical knowledge. And that's something I harp on all the time. And I probably will say again, like, I think skill and talent are level 0. And if you want to get to level 1, you need to up your social game and your like interest in working hard.
Not the social game. I mean, it's absolutely true. I can remember the times I would say I've made significant errors as an intern, and they were all me being annoying. And it had nothing to do with whether I was good at my job. It was that I wouldn't shut up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, also, yeah, knowing when to stay quiet, super huge. Like reading the room, just reading the room. Like, you know, as an intern, I got to sit in on big sessions with huge muckety mucks at ad agencies that were, you know, making multi-million-dollar decisions. And I knew I'm here as a fly on the wall. Mm-hmm. At best, at the end, if I want to like get in on the conversation briefly where we're talking about episodes of SNL and I bring up a sketch that everyone makes everyone laugh, like fine, but like that's it. Like I'm just in the background listening, watching. And if they talk to me, great opportunity. Yeah. But for the most part, yeah, early on in your career, just listen, say yes, and be fun.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people who are younger coming into the industry don't realize that I experience this also on movie sets where you think like, oh, I need to be looking at everything. You're hired for a very specific job, and movie sets are so many arms of people who are all hired to do different jobs to make the machine work. And you can think that like, oh, that set doesn't look dressed right. It's not your job. There is somebody else whose whole job is to pay attention to how the set looks. And if you have a problem, like just whisper it to a producer and then they will take care of it. Yeah, like it's not your job to course correct everything.
If you do notice stuff like that and you do whisper it to a producer and it does turn out to be helpful, that's going to win you so like the fact that you whispered it is going to win you so many bonus points because the producer can now take credit for something that you noticed. It's dumb. You have to do that though. Like maybe they won't, but maybe they will. And then they remember you, you know, like making other people look good is so huge.
It absolutely. And also being able to, I think you have to gain a skill of like sugarcoating things in a way that will get things done, but also not make people feel bad. I feel like especially in edit in post-production. Because again, I also was in these rooms where you're watching somebody tweak like frames of a second and in your head, A, it might not matter. B, it looks fine. Don't worry about it. But just not saying something that will piss somebody off in the moment or delivering news in a way that doesn't make them feel like they've fucked up, even though you're like, actually, this is terrible and we're going to move in a different direction. It's a real skill that I think being an intern, everyone thinks an internship is about like networking. And you know what, Ryan, it's about building your social game.
I mean, networking is part of that, right? It is about networking to a certain extent, but you can't seem like that's what you're there for. It's such I don't know, like, I feel like I did it so blindly, but looking back, I'm like, okay, I could see where I made correct decisions and in the way that I behaved, but also I was so naive, like, and I think I interned at a place where they had interns regularly. Every 3 months they had a new intern. So there was like a vibe there where people were kind and nice to you as an intern. They weren't abusive. They didn't like, you know, they worked me hard, but that's what I'm there for.
Yeah.
And it's not like they were like, go get me a Sprite. Oh, this Sprite is cold. bring me a new Sprite. They weren't doing that kind of shit. They were making me do stuff that was helpful to the business. And so I had a good situation. Not every internship is amazing, and not every internship is worth working that hard and that, so I think it just depends on the situation. But yeah, I mean, if you want to parlay an internship into further work in a career field, I think all this stuff we're talking about is very important.
So to go back to you playing the violin and your actual music background, I was a huge band kid. My mom was a music teacher, and I remember trying composing a little bit and just being like, this is not how my brain works. It's so difficult. And I think also sometimes you can look and see all the instruments in the world and be like, how the hell am I supposed to know how to make all of these different instruments sound good and how to work with this? Where did you start to feel comfortable in actually composing? Is it a little bit of the digital and analog, or did you find that you were composing with actual instruments and then taking that into like a digital space?
Well, in college, I took a composition class because the professor was like my idol. He was also my advisor. I was obsessed with him, and I wanted to take every class he taught. And I had done songwriting and stuff in high school. I had a few songs that I'd play at coffee houses and stuff like that. So, but not like composing for actual orchestras, whatever. And I took this composition class, and obviously I learned a ton because that's what you're there for in college. I just found I did find that I liked restriction. The more restriction I had over my composition ahead of time, the easier and more fun it was to come up with something. So I'd often do conceptual pieces that I would write based on a overarching theme. I wrote a lot of string quartets. One was based on Watership Down. One was based on the state of Wyoming, where my grandma lived and where I visited in the summers. So it was the more restrictions. It was a lot of top-down composing, where I'd come up with the name of the song or the name of the movement, and then I would write what I felt represented that. But yeah, in terms of how to make instruments work together and stuff, a lot of it was trial and error. And then there's just. I do have a good ear. I think if there's one thing that I bring to the table that's unique to me and probably my best compositional skill is that I can listen to a piece of music and generally be able to figure out how it's put together and how to do it, but not it. That's what I had to do for ads. That was a huge skill. Working on ads it's helped me. It helps me every single day as a media composer, which is being able to listen to a temp track or something that the client loves but can't afford, and do my version of that is legal. That's just a skill that I've had even since I was young and was writing songs on my dad's computer. How do I do a New Kids on the Block song without doing New Kids on the Block?
I love early music, music that people make when they're young. There was a show on Nickelodeon when I was a kid called The Naked Brothers Band, which is such a weird show in retrospect, but all about these 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds who are making music and writing songs.
Yeah.
And that era of just my song is absolute nonsense. It's the most basic thing in the world, but at least I put this song out there and tried. I think that is people get so scared by, I think, the process of failing and being embarrassing, especially now where everything is embarrassing and it's online forever and you want to die.
I know. I am I do wish that I had a recording of some of those early songs, because they don't exist anymore. They're on a floppy drive somewhere.
Lost media.
I wish I still had them, but also I'm glad they're not on the internet.
Yeah. Nobody, I got to get back to sheet music to the song I wrote in 3rd grade called Butterfly. And you're not going to believe it. It was about a butterfly.
There's a big famous pop song, right?
Yeah. That's what I was going for. No, not at all. Something that I know that you did, and it is your origin, I think, of Rick and Morty, but more so, I think it's important to talk about the idea of making things creatively without making money. We all want to make money. We know. Listen, the industry sucks and we all deserve to get paid what we want to get paid. But Channel 101, you described it as like this, it's such a place to learn and grow and meet people. I think it's 100% accurate. How did you find out about Channel 101 and what made you want to participate in it?
Yeah, I think back on this moment a lot. My wife and I talk about it because she found Channel 101 on a website called Metafilter. It's sort of like a precursor to Reddit where people would share links and then they would get discussed. And someone linked to Channel 101 and it was Christmas 2005. So it had only been around for a couple of years. And there were a few, like Dan Harmon had a show called Laser Fart. There were like a couple of shows that, and people that later became huge, like Jack Black was in shows and stuff. And we watched it. She showed it to me. We watched it. And she's like, hey, the screening's in LA every month. We should go. Because we had just moved to LA together. And we got married in 2004 and we started living in LA together in 2004. So it was very new. And she was like, let's go. So we went and it was so inspiring. Like being in this setting where there was, only a couple hundred people, but they were all just like dying over everyone's shows. They were totally into it. There was this love of creating and being funny. And like, that was like purposefully designed to be sort of outside of the normal TV system. So less cynical, way less cynical. Just the audience decides whatever the top 5 vote, the audience voted for their favorites, whatever the top 5 were, they got to make the next episode. It was extremely democratic. Now, there was the classic people voting for their friends, people bringing large groups of friends and family to come vote for their show. That always got, part of it, but it felt just like very fun and fresh. And there were just these people making funny things that I was just like, this looks fun. This looks totally different than what I do for my day job, because I was working on commercials then. And they had a message board and I was like, hey, does anyone want music? Here's my reel, which was just a bunch of music I had written for ads. And a couple people reached out and I worked with some people and then finally worked with someone who got a show in the screening. And that show like became popular. It was like one of the top shows. It came back for 6 or 7 episodes and my music was a big part of it. I just sort of like, because of that, got to be friends with these people and we'd go to the screenings and hang out. And it just became like a social thing where we would just watch and everyone would make these videos. And it was just very fun. I just made new friends and didn't really think about, oh, these people are going to be famous someday, whatever, nobody knew. But now, like almost to a person, every single person who was making shows back then, everyone is working in the industry. And many of them are just wildly successful, like there was this guy who made shows, Kyle Ryder, and he made a bunch of shows. They were really good, really popular. He is now multi-time Emmy nominated. He was Emmy nominated against himself in the editing category for Atlanta and Barry. Like,
oh my God. Imagine you worked on Atlanta and Barry in this. Oh
yeah. So just people's careers have taken, obviously, Dan Harmon, stuff like that have really taken off from Channel 101. And it just, it just happened to be at that time. And I think still a place is like TV boot camp where you could go. And I think the key takeaway for me from this and this thing that I like share with young people who are moving to LA and wanting to get into the business is that there's this sort of, I think people assume when you come, you need to target people that are higher than you on the food chain. I want to work with this person who's making movies. I want to get as high as I can, as fast as I can.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be said for working with people who are at the same level as you. And growing together. I mean, if you look at a lot of the best composers, media composers, are people who got big because they worked with directors who were also primed to get big. They weren't big yet. Like biggest composer in the world, Ludwig Göransson. Like he started with his college friend who made film, student films.
Yeah.
And he started with his college friend who made rap songs, and like they both took off, and his career is huge now because of it. And he would have had a great career anyways because he's wildly talented, but like he didn't immediately after graduating start going, I need to work for Hans Zimmer. Like he worked with people that were at his level and they grew together. And I think that's, you have to buy as many lottery tickets as possible to try to win the lottery. In as a composer, especially, it's so competitive. But I think, there are more lottery tickets available at your price range than there are in the upper echelons in the beginning. So I don't know. It's a bad analogy, but that's
no. I mean, you were just talking about what you just said. It made me think of like how Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were friends. How all these British comedians I really love went to college together. How when you think about certain shows, like Broad City was a web series produced by two girls who went to UCB together. All these things that are like, if you want to make something and make something popular and create movies and TV and film, you can look at some person who's way ahead of you, honestly, isn't going to want to train you and make you a better artist or creator unless they really like you.
They're very generous maybe, but most likely they don't have time.
Yeah, they don't have time to bring you up in your career, but your friends are always there with you and are there to collaborate. I mean, I work a ton with my friends or like my coworkers at my office because, hey, we have access to the gear room. Like, let's make something.
Yeah.
It is the most necessary step, I think, to getting better as an artist is just making stuff over and over again. And that's why I think Channel 101 and your story with it is, we work your day job. Don't quit your day job to try and be a filmmaker right away. Like work the job that gets you the money and then make whatever you want to make on the side. And eventually you'll be able to combine the two as long as you're passionate and you care enough about it. Cause it happens. I think people are obsessed with, I'm kind of obsessed with like, so-and-so didn't start directing until they were 30. Like, great. give me some more time. Like, or Oprah didn't make a show till she was 35. Awesome. I'm not in a rush.
I know. Especially now, the older I get, the more those stories are. I'm like, they're like precious pearls for sure. Oh, I still have time. This person didn't get huge, so they were 55. Okay, I got time. I think the real lesson here is just marry someone who has good taste in websites and can find cool things for you to do.
Perfect. Yeah. Does she hold that over your head that she is like a direct lineage?
She doesn't hold it over my head. But we definitely talk about like, man, how lucky was that? Like, who knows what would have happened without it? Probably still be working on ads, to be honest.
I think about that a lot. I found like a niche comedy show, and if I didn't have it, I wouldn't have the person I live with. I wouldn't have the friends I have, and I wouldn't be where I am. And it's really cool. I think that you think you want to go big and you want to be involved in the best shows and so-and-so's making a YouTube show with millions of views. Be yourself. Okay. Thank you so much, Ryan. That's the end of the podcast. Or we're walking away being like, be yourself.
It's a good note to end on.
Perfect. We're done. Well, obviously, Channel 101, I think, is the connection to it's not the only thing I want to talk about, right? Because there's something very important I want to discuss with you. But you meet Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon and introduce the idea of Doc and Marty through Channel 101. What was that like? But also, did you get a sense of like, this is picking up a lot of steam? Was it feeling more popular than anything you'd worked on before?
Well, Doc and Marty, no. Doc and Marty was like, they made 2 episodes, I think. It's so weird. Like, I wasn't even supposed to work on Doc and Marty, which was, for people who are listening who don't know, Doc and Marty was a animated short that became the inspiration for Rick and Morty. Mm-hmm. And it was, really, really inappropriate and gross and blah, 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 especially in retrospect. But the main takeaway here for me is that I used to oversee at the studio I worked at. We used to film there for Channel 101. A lot of like shows were filmed there. It might be the number one most used set specific location in all of Channel 101. Because at night people would leave and I'd be like, yeah, come, let's film. And I would just clean up after and it was fine. They didn't care. And it had like office areas and it had the recording studio area. There was just a lot of areas you could use.
Yeah.
So we were filming there a different show and Justin was in the show. I think it was one of Dan's shows. Justin was playing a part in the show and he's like, hey, I'm working on this animated thing, Doc and Marty. Can you like do like little sitcom stings based on the Huey Lewis song from Back to the Future?
Power of Love, baby.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember. But so I did these little like guitar stings that ended on, like sitcom-y type chords. And I did them that night while they were filming. And Justin was like, perfect. And I had never worked with him before. And that it was basically that moment. He never asked anyone else to make music for him. It was just me. From then on, like I did everything with him. Anytime he needed music, it was almost always me. And so, yeah, I mean, ironically, the first thing I worked on with him was Doc and Marty, and then we did Rick and Morty later. But yeah, I mean, Doc and Marty was like, I don't even know if they got voted back after their first episode. If they did, the second one was just more of the same and they got canceled. But Justin was always making crazy animated shows. House of Cosby's was a big one that kind of broke outside of the Channel 101 universe at that time. And so, yeah, I mean, I never would have guessed that those characters would become a TV show, much less a successful TV show. Even when we were working on the pilot for Rick and Morty, like I knew that it was funny and it made me laugh, and I knew like Adult Swim, it's got Dan, who's community famous, and Justin, who's like coming up. And I thought, okay, well, this has got a shot to like at least get a 10 episode order and we'll do a season and then, whatever. It's Adult Swim. It's not going to be a big show. It's not going to be popular. But for me, it was like, hey, I want to get on a show, like a real show that goes on TV. I hadn't been, I had worked on other shows as like a co-composer or hired gun, where it was like through someone else's business, but I had never done one that was just me. So we did the pilot and it just, people loved it. It got so like, I remember going to the like pilot, the party where they had finished the pilot. It was like the wrap party for the pilot. Yeah. And we hadn't heard yet if it got picked up or whatever. And they screened it and, the cast was all there. Actually, the original Beth was Allison Brie, so she was there.
Wow.
And it was just really fun. The vibes were just amazing, right? Just like so good. And from then on, I realized anytime I work on a new show, if the wrap party has good vibes, it's probably going to do well. And that has been a bellwether for every show I've ever worked on.
Oh my God. You're not wrong. Especially like, so I felt that way for movies too, where I've worked on a movie and then we're done with it. It's like, okay, if the rap party was crazy, like we had a tough but good time making this. If the rap party is nothing, we coasted.
For whatever reason, I think people subconsciously know if a show is going to be a hit or not when they go to that rap party. And if they're like, I don't believe in this show, they're not going to have as fun of a time at the rap party. I truly think that.
The power of the rap party. Wow.
Yeah. It's a good bellwether, but I still didn't think it was going to be remotely as much of a hit as it was. Obviously, I mean, who could predict that, right? It's Adult Swim. They've never had a hit that big. They never had anything that was culturally as relevant, and it grew fast, like way too fast, if you ask me. Now we're in a good spot. We got our fans, people who like it. We aren't trying to please literally the entire world like we were in season 4. And we got an amazing showrunner, Scott Martyr, who's like really steering the ship in a way that, with just calmness and focus, in a way that we never had until he was on board. So,
I mean, it is such a massive, I think, now we can be like, oh yeah, Rick and Morty, that show's been on forever. But I feel like when it had a grasp on the reins, it was explosive, in such a strange, I mean, it's in like every smoke shop you ever go to, there's like a Rick and Morty bong. There's like kids walking around in Rick and Morty t-shirts. Do you ever think about that? It's like, my mother teaches elementary school, and sometimes she'll be like, they're wearing a Rick and Morty shirt, and I don't know why. I think that's nuts that it has when something that is for adults reaches like teenager kid level. And like Family Guy, I felt like had that same thing where you're like, why are your parents letting you watch Family Guy?
Yeah. I know. I'm always like, whenever I see someone young wearing Rick and Morty stuff, I'm like, awesome, but also what? Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's one of those shows, I think, that I think the audience will mostly stay the same age through its run. Mm-hmm. Like the vast majority of our audience is, 16 to 20-year-old men. The vast majority, the best humans on the planet.
Everyone's favorite.
So it's funny because my wife and I have a joke that if we see like a young bearded man, there's like a 98% chance that he's a Rick and Morty fan. Like it's just without fail. It's all, and she loves to be like, hey, do you guys know Rick and Morty?
Which is also a hilarious question, I think, to ask now, because if they haven't heard about Rick and Morty, like they must live under a box. Like even if they don't even watch, they've heard of it.
At that age, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, older people my age, it's a tougher sell sometimes. But
when you started at Rick and Morty, I'm very curious about how much of the creative process is you just bringing something to the table, saying, this is what I thought, this is what I felt like would work. For example, starting with the theme song. Are you given creative direction on, hey, this is where we want the theme song to go. This is the main melody we're looking for, the main sequence. Here's the storyboards. Or are you just saying, hey, here's a song I wrote. What do you think? Do you think you can use it? Obviously, there's a lot more intricacies than that. But.
Yeah. So the theme song and then the rest of the music are kind of two different stories.
Yeah, exactly.
The theme song has a sort of unique backstory in that I originally wrote it for a different pilot or a different pitch. It was for a Nickelodeon show that Justin and Ryan Ridley were pitching called Dog World. And so a lot of the creative direction on the theme song was originally for the Dog World theme intro, which ended up being pretty similar in terms of like creative. It was like, a montage. Dog World did have narration over the top of the intro, on Dog World, blah, 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 whatever. Or my name's Jerry, whatever. And this is my story in Dog World. So that's why the theme song kind of has that steady build to it, is because it was originally built to have narration over the top. But Justin really, really, really loved that theme song I did for Dog World. And when we were doing the pilot for Rick and Morty, I was like, hey, we need something for the main title. Let's just throw this in for now as a placeholder. I know you love it. Essentially, yeah, but of course we could have it. It was unowned, so eventually, if everyone still loved it, for me, it's a win-win, right? Like I already did the work, so and I love the track too. So it was not like a tough sell for either of us to try to use it again. I think I edited it. I changed like the form of it a little bit. It was longer before, a little more boring at times because, like I said, there's supposed to be narration over it. And it just never got taken out, never got replaced. I even offered at one point, I said to Justin, hey, maybe we hire an orchestra to because it was all in the box, that theme song. I was like, maybe we hire an orchestra to replace these orchestral parts so they sound more, whatever, like a real orchestra. And he was like, well, is that going to change it? Because I love it. And I was like, yeah, it'll change it. So maybe we don't do it then. And also, it's expensive, and that's a tough sell for a show that no one knows if it's going to be. If they had known it was going to be as big of a hit as it was, I'm sure they would have been like, yeah, let's fucking do it. Get an orchestra. Can I swear? Sorry.
No. Oh my God, please. If honestly, I would not do podcasts if I couldn't swear.
Fair enough. So the theme song is different, but in terms of like the general creative process behind the show itself, the vast majority of the music that I write for the show just comes right out of my own brain, in the sense that they don't temp the show. Especially early on, there was zero temp, nothing. It was, they'd send me just totally dry animatic that I would, animatic, if anyone doesn't know, is basically like very simple slideshow of the episode set to the audio. So they lock the audio for the episode, and then they create this like rough slideshow that goes along with it to sort of pseudo animate, but nothing moves. It's just like shot, move to the next shot. And that's like how to get timings for the animators, the people who do the color animation. So I usually work to the animatic. There's almost never any music on the animatic. And I just watch it down. I go, okay, I think there needs to be music here. There needs to be music there. And then I just do it, and I send it to them, and they go, hey, there shouldn't be music here. Let's pull it out. Or they go, hey, there's a cue missing here. Can we get some music for that? But for the most part, the first pass at it is just what I think I want and what I think will work best for me. And also what I know Dan likes, because Dan, having worked with Dan enough now, I know that he doesn't want music to get in the way of anything. So a lot of times I do leave things drier than I would on other shows. I worked on Inside Job on Netflix. It's another animated show, and it's an adult animation. And that had a lot more music because the creative direction was just more music. And then of course I worked on The Boss Baby Back in Business, which is a kid's show. And that's wall to wall. Like we did, the episodes are 22 minutes. We would have 19 minutes of music. Like it was insane. And Rick and Morty on average has maybe 12 minutes of music, sometimes even as low as like I've done episodes that I think had like 3 minutes of music. So it's very like I leave a lot of space for comedy. I leave a lot of space for conversation that, Dan doesn't like the music to hold the audience's hand and say, here's how you should feel in this section.
I think that's a really tough as a person who, went to media school, because I'm not really a filmmaker, but when I watch movies and I feel like or TV shows, and I feel like people make fun of Netflix all the time for using music that is meant to hold in reality shows in particular, right? The music that's like, oh, I'm heartbroken. The song is all about being heartbroken. It takes so much away when it almost feels like you can't think for yourself about the emotions that a character is experiencing on screen.
I think it tips the scene too sometimes. Like we were just watching Fargo the new season last night, and there was a scene where there was like kind of quirky music playing, but if it hadn't been quirky, I would have felt tense.
Yes.
Like I would have felt like, oh, something bad might happen any second now. And I was like, why not let me feel that? You know what I mean? But, I think the music on that show is brilliant. I'm not criticizing their choice. It was just a choice that for me did sort of like, as someone who cares about it, pays attention to the music in every possible scene, I was like, okay, I can relax now during this scene. And, whatever, that's probably what they wanted. But
no, I think it's 100% true. Also, I think that, Dan coming from a show like Community, I love Community, that's a show where it really is like sprinkles in the background sometime. And you can tell that it gets very creative, but also in some ways will not indicate plot whatsoever. It's like interstitials, or it's very rarely being like, comedies, like, I think everyone thinks about 30 Rock is like an iconic comedy with iconic music. It rarely indicates to you the way that you're supposed to feel versus a drama where comedy's
different, especially sitcom. You know, when I was an intern, and then when I was an employee at Emoto Music is where we did commercials. They also did TV shows. And one of the shows they did was Just Shoot Me, which if you remember, David Spade's sitcom. And I remember going, man, if this pays well, this is like the best gig in the world. Cause they would get together twice a season and just sit, mic up their acoustics, get a drummer and just sit and like jam out 5-second pieces of music, like just 55-second pieces of music. And they'd hand those to the editor and he would do the entire show just off those. And, you know, occasionally they would have like a specialty cue where they're at like a dance and they need music in the background. They're not going to pay for something that already exists. They have a composer, might as well write it. And that would be it. Like, and I just remember thinking like, man, sitcoms are where it's at. Like you don't work that much. And if it's network, you probably get paid a crap ton of money. And you do. If you work on a network, which I've only worked on one, which we were talking about before, which was a sketch show. But my dream was always like, let me get a network sitcom.
I've been watching Friends for the first time, and that I love the music in Friends also because Danny and I talk about it. Like sometimes you're like, oh, this sounds like Billy Joel right now. They're like, this is the Billy Joel track. This is the Bruce Springsteen track. Like everything kind of evokes another musician. But when they'll end an episode on a tense note, no music. They don't even put like a little sad guitar twang. It's just dry, empty. And I'm so conditioned, I think, to think that sitcoms are going to go for the hokiest music or the most like, like inspire if something sad is happening and not funny. And Friends has such interesting music. That is kind of the dream. I think in some ways too, like people are always like, do you want to work on Law and Order? I'm like, not really, but I guess I would like to be employed forever. That's
yeah. I mean, I'm hoping Rick and Morty lasts a long time. I don't know what will happen when our 10 season deal is done, but yeah, I mean, it's the sort of the holy grail of working in media is to work on something that just have that job security. And for me, especially, like, I know not all composers are like this. They're always looking for the next big thing, the next new thing. I'm more than happy to do like the South Park guy or like, the Simpsons composer who was employed for whatever, 30 seasons before they let him go. Like it's awesome. Like having that peace of mind, you know. But I'll still do a network sitcom any day of the week. Those seem fun and easy.
Well, something you mentioned, I heard you talk about, you get an animatic and you have, do you ever see a script? Do you ever see the script for the episode before they've recorded lines, or you're just handed the animatic and that's the first time you've heard the
I'll
story?
See the script if there is a specific song with lyrics in the episode. For example, I got the script to the episode with Goodbye Moon Men in it because I had to write that way ahead of time. So they sent me the script of that and were like, hey, there's a song on page 32, whatever. The lyrics, it's supposed to sound like David Bowie. Can you send us something with that? And then, you know, so that I'll write ahead of time. But I generally don't see the scripts unless there's song lyrics in the script that need to be recorded ahead of time. Now, a lot of stuff, the lyrics will be recorded when they record like Dan Harmon will improvise a song and then I have to back compose it by adding music underneath this improvised thing. And it's a system that he and I have worked out that works well for us, but I don't recommend it when you're working on shows, especially unless you know the person really well. Like it's much easier for them to write the lyrics and send you something and then the animators animate to the music that you wrote, as opposed to you making music to this vocal that the animator's already animated to and you're stuck with. But, you know, I did it a couple times. Invisible Garbage Truck Jerry was fully improvised a cappella by Dan that I added music to. The Steve Chutback song was that too. So we've done it a few times. But, you know, like I said, don't get scripts usually.
Wow.
It's too early for me at that point most of the time.
Yeah.
I know I have a problem. I was just talking about this the other day. When I read a script, I just don't see music in the script ever. Like I'll read a script and go, okay, there's maybe 2-3 minutes of music in this episode. It's really dry. And then it'll come back and it's like fully temped, like top to bottom. And I'm like, wait, what? So I have I'd rather not read the script, to be honest, because of that.
Wow. I have such a complete opposite because I just did background casting on a movie. And so I read the script top to bottom, and you're just reading between the lines to be like, okay, they're at a coffee shop. I bet they need people there. Like my brain is like thinking about the scene as it's happening in order to be like, I'm sure there are people in the background in this moment in time. I can't, I'm like, so like, I can't imagine not having the script, but what are you
It's
going to
already
do?
done. I mean, the script
Yeah.
is done. It's recorded by the time I am necessary.
Wow.
So it's just easier for me. And I think most composers, a lot of composers work way later in the project, even in animation,
Right.
than I do on Rick and Morty. I get involved very early before there's any color. And a lot of animation composers won't work until the cut is locked with color, which is usually like 2 weeks before the mix. Meanwhile, I'm starting 6 months before the mix on Rick and Morty.
So sweet.
It's great. I mean, it's a lot of time to like, set my schedule in a way that works for me. The bad part is that it gives a lot of time to tinker and overthink too. So I think it works best when you're working with a team that you have a really good relationship with and a good understanding of like what you bring to the table and what they need from you. I wouldn't recommend having 6 months of a note giving window of 6 months for most projects, because they will give you notes for 6 months then.
Yeah. Are you doing all 10 episodes? Well, I guess like, are you doing all episodes for the season in those 6 months? Or is it like, episode 1 will air and then 2 weeks later, episode 3 will air. So you have 6 months for episode 1 airing and 6 months for episode 3 airing, or
I generally will do the whole season in that 6 months. I like to have my first pass of all 10 episodes done before we mix episode 1, because the mix process is where we address the notes on stuff. Rick and Morty is mixed in a really different way than any other show. Like a lot of shows, when you mix, that's it. But Rick and Morty is constantly making picture changes. There's people who are watching the episode for the first time in several months when they come to the mix. So it's much more of a nebulous process. So I am often doing notes or making changes to music in the mix or even shortly after the mix. So it's just easier for me if I'm not also writing episode 10 or 9 or whatever while we're mixing episode 1. Because I do have the time to not let them overlap, I take that time. But I've worked on other shows where we're writing a new episode. Like we'll be working on episode 6. We're doing notes on episode 5 and 4, and we're mixing episode 3 all within the same 1 week period. Yeah. And it's it's the job, and happy to do it when I've done it, but it's more fun to pace it out a little more, and like just allows me to be more creative and address the notes in a way that isn't rushed. And I don't have to hire a bunch of help too, which is the name of the game for composers. If they want to do a bunch of shows, you have to have a big team, and I don't need a team if I'm just working on Rick and Morty, which is great.
Everything you're describing, the show that I work on just got announced. It's going to come out March 1st. Somebody feed Phil. And we have a very similar process to what you described of that show, where it's everything is in the edit at the same time. You just have 10 episodes flying around in your head, all at different stages of creation, and things get lost in the shuffle. You just lose track of like what's going on with certain things, can fall behind. I do not enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I have found that I work best when I'm able to focus on one episode at a time. So I'm lucky to be able to do that. Not every show is like that. Most shows aren't.
No.
Yeah.
When you get a new episode and you get an animatic, where does it start? Because you have you have a canvas in front of you that has a lot to it, but at the same time, you musically have such a blank canvas. Where do you even begin when you have a completely empty episode, I guess is the word I'm thinking of, to make music?
Well, it's sort of become the way where I do it is I'll watch the animatic, and then I'll just watch it. I won't spot it. I won't, I'll think about music because that's my job, but I won't like overly get detailed. Just watch the episode, take it in, laugh, enjoy it, all those things. Having seen it for the first time, it's exciting. So I just want to enjoy the episode because I like the show. And then I'll usually just let it sit in the back of my brain for a week or two, and then I'll spot it. But then spotting is much more meticulous. I'm going through and I got my spreadsheet. I use this site called QDB, which is like a cloud-based Q spreadsheet system. It's awesome. And I'll go through, mark timings in and out of where I think it should start and where it should end. And I'm pausing the picture a lot. But really, it's, my years of experience of doing this. It's pretty straightforward and easy for me now. I don't usually miss opportunities for music because my goal is to sort of overscore and have them pull stuff out. I'd much rather they pull stuff out at the last minute than ask me to write a full cue at the last minute, obviously. So I'm usually trying to put more music in than I think maybe it needs. And not being precious about the stuff I put in at all, because I know at any moment something could get pulled out and that's fine. I've only had a few heartbreaks over the years acting that way. But for the most part, it's like, fine, whatever, let's get rid of it. Or it's like, let's simplify it sometimes too. But so, yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's self-explanatory. The show kind of has a vibe, a flow to it in terms of how music works. There's not a lot of music at the beginning when we're setting things up. Usually there's a cue right at the beginning in the cold open or something that sets the tone. But then there's always a lot of talking and people interacting with each other that doesn't need a lot of music. And then towards the end, there's usually an action set piece or something. I'm really boiling it down here, but the vast majority of the music comes at the end usually. There's been a few exceptions. One, the Night Family episode I spotted, and I just had music during the night phases. And Rob Schraub, the director and writer of that episode, was like, hey, I actually want tension during the day phases too. I really want this to feel like a horror movie. And horror movies have a lot of music, even though it's drones or whatever. So I basically went from like the episode having 12 minutes of music to the episode having 17 and a half, 18 minutes of music after the first pass, because I didn't do those day scenes. And but that's like, the exception. Most of the time what I do and the way I spot it is pretty close to where it needs to be.
Are you starting your composition on like a keyboard, just playing out loud? Are you working on your computer? Are you working in like the software you use? Where do you start actually writing the music?
It's all in Pro Tools. That's what I work on. I have a template. It's basically like all the instruments that I think I'm going to want to use. And there's a lot of instruments that get reused from cue to cue for a vast majority of the underscore. Mm-hmm. And so I have those already set up, already in a session, and I just open up that session. I import the video. I find my timings. Usually I'll figure out the tempo and the timings and so that the tempo matches and gets hits where I need it to visually. And I'll do a tempo map first with a lot of markers. Okay, here's where I need to come in. Here's where I need to come out, pause, get big here, whatever. And then I'll load up my instruments. A lot of times I do percussion first if it's a big percussive track, or I'll come up with sort of a melody that I want to use, and then I fill in. And it's just a lot of like paint by numbers puzzle. I mean, that sounds boring, but a lot of it is just like fill in the blanks. Like I know what instruments I'm going to use. And each season I try to like refresh my template with some new sounds so that it doesn't sound super stagnant. I've gotten a lot more synthesizers, a lot more analog synth, more sort of 80s synthwave sound into the sound of the show. Do
you get to go to production and be like, hey, I want to buy this new synth this year. Can I have some money?
No, that's all. I'm freelance. So, I'm on a work for hire basis. So all of that's out of my own pocket. But, luckily because of the popularity of the show, I've been able to make, relationships with people in the industry that make those. Like Korg gave me a keyboard that was really fun. Actually, they gave me two, and they're cool. And so I get a lot of what I do is in the box. Though these keyboards behind me are just collecting dust. They almost never get used. It's sad.
I have the keyboard we have in the guitar just sits in the corner a while, and you're like, oh, I know how to play that instrument. I should play that again right now.
Yeah.
I forgot. So when you have a song that, like you talked about Moon Man, Goodbye Moon Man, when you have a song that is specifically for either like another musician or a guest star, what is the process for their recording? Do you have any involvement in, like Darren Criss being in the studio or Jermaine Clement being in the studio, or are you writing lyric, or I guess are the lyrics coming to you first? You're making music and then sending it out. Where do you tie into a process with like a guest star musician?
It's run the gamut, but basically what I prefer to do is I prefer to have a writer write the lyrics, because I can write lyrics. I have written lyrics. I don't think it's my strong suit. I think if we're going to, especially if the song's going to be funny, it needs to be written by a funny person.
Yeah.
So the Darren Criss song, let's use that as an example, or let's use the Jermaine Clement song as an example. Those lyrics were in the script, and they appear in the song almost exactly how they were in the script. But they didn't know how it was going to work melodically. That's up to me to come up with how the melody works. So I just sing it myself. I record it. I sing it myself, and I do the best I can. My voice is fine. It's not great, but I can hit the notes, and I'll send with Jermaine. We were recording. He was in New Zealand, so we were recording him remotely via ISDN. And they had a session booked. It was an hour, and they had to get a bunch of lines from him for the episode. So they did all that, and then there was like 15 minutes left, and they're like, "Okay, Elder, now there's time to do the song." And luckily, Jermaine is amazing and a pro.
Yeah.
And so good and a good singer, because we basically only did like 2 takes of that song.
Wow.
And I was going to get him doing the background vocals, and there just wasn't time. So those background vocals are me. And he just like did so many cool things. Like there was the part where he goes space, 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 where I was originally on my voice, I used a delay effect. So it was actually an echo, and he sang the echo. And I was like, that's too funny. We got to leave that in, right? Like I'm not going to do all the effect on it when he already did a funny thing. And he like went too high on one of the melodies. He goes so freaking high on a goodbye, where he hit a harmony part instead of the melody. And I was like, that's actually amazing that he hits that note, and also very funny that he goes way up there. It's funnier. So we kept that in. I didn't have him redo it the way that I originally intended, because I was like open to this idea of him bringing comedy to the song.
What a perfect person to have do like musical comedy, right? Oh God.
I know. With season 2, it was like a dream come true. He's so freaking cool too. He's just the coolest dude. So nice. And he's been nice about that song. Like after it aired, he's like, man, he messaged me on Twitter and was like, man, people love this song. We might even have to start playing it at shows. I was like, you be my guest. Like you have yeah. Just the best guy. And then Darren Criss, awesome too. His was sort of the same thing, although this was post-scored. Like the scene needed a song, it didn't have it, and it was already animated. And I had written this instrumental, and Dan had this idea, like, let's make it a song. And Darren had been in an episode that season. Maybe it was even in that. No, he was in a different episode that season. And I knew he was a fan of the show and had been wanting to work with us and sing a song. And I was like, what if we got Darren to sing this song, kind of a thing? And he was amazing, like so pro. And we actually had time, produced him remotely as well. We had time to get like a bunch of takes, and he just like had so many ideas how to make it, like kick it up a notch in terms of like quality. He was an absolute pro, super fun to work with, super nice. But then, like I said, there's other songs that get improvised, and I have to figure out how to put music to them. And then there's songs that I've written where I have lyrics that I wrote, or a song that I collabed with my friend Lauren, who goes by Katomi. We did a couple songs for the show. one that she wrote the lyrics for. I wrote the verse melody and I sent it to her, and she wrote the lyrics to the verse and then came up with a chorus melody and lyrics. And so we sort of collabed on it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to be animated to. It was just like, let's make a song that sounds like a license, like a needle drop. So it just depends. A lot of times the songs come out of, they don't even know there's going to be a song there until they start putting the show together. Like there isn't even in the script a spot where they point out a song plays here.
Yeah. So why nobody reason to read the script if they don't even know that there's going to be a song.
It's different for each script is sort of different. Like they come up with
exactly.
There's a 4-minute musical montage in the Vat of Acid episode that was not in the script at all. The episode was short and the director was like, we need to like fill time during this montage. Let's extend it. And so they added like a 4-minute thing. And that is like, I had to do music from beginning to end on that. And that wasn't in the script. So there's a lot, like they're not afraid to make changes. They're not afraid to do whatever it takes to like make the episode great at any stage, which is awesome. When
you're making a song like a song like that is from like Justin Roiland singing, right? Maybe these are different, but like Get Swifty or like, the Tiny Rick songs, like I assume that those have lyrics to them. And then in my mind, the way I thought it would work is like, okay, we have these lyrics written. This is a joke song. Here's a song. Okay, now Roiland's going to sing it. Is he improvising it at all? Or are you collaborating with him to make that song?
Well, it's interesting you brought up two examples that are very different. Get Swifty was fully improvised, and it was actually improvised initially for a video game based on the show. There was like a Flash game that Adult Swim made where you were Morty and you could explore Summer's room and you found her iPod and there were 3 songs on it. And those 3 songs eventually all made it into the show proper. Get Swifty was one of them, and he just fully improvised that. But the Tiny Rick song was in the script, and it was like, Tiny Rick is playing guitar in front of his classmates and he sings this song, and then there were lyrics. And so I just was like, let me just set these lyrics to like a little folky song for Tiny Rick to sing. And I sing it myself. I send it to Justin. He records his own voice on it.
Very interesting.
I'm excited about these new voice actors, Harry, oh my God, Harry and Ian, because they both can sing. So I'm like, the first thing I said when I met them, I was like, can you sing? Let's do this.
Yeah, they've been doing a great job. I think they really hit the mark in a lot of ways that it doesn't, to me, like a viewer who has been watching since the beginning, doesn't feel like anything different.
Yeah, they're awesome guys too.
What about making music for, there's so many episodes. So I'm like, were there songs for other main characters? Have you written for the other voice actors? Are there a lot of them? I feel like there's
no songs for, Morty is rapped, but not sung. Jerry, Beth, no singing. Yeah, it's pretty much only Rick and Morty that sing on camera. Like,
what a shame.
Vocal.
I'm a big fan of do you remember when Scrubs did a musical episode? And I
feel like Harmon will never want to do a musical episode because, he might, but they made a riff on it. They like, in the Story Train episode, there was a joke like, remember when Rick and Morty did a musical episode and we did that one little bit? And that was the bit that I wrote with Jess McKenna and Zach Reno, the two that have that improvised musical theater show. Yeah. They're great. And we wrote that song together. And actually there is a full version of it that got waylaid by the pandemic that I'm hoping to put out on a soundtrack or something.
Oh, it doesn't even need to do a musical episode. I'm just obsessed with the idea of like, get Chris Parnell in the booth. We need to
he'd be amazing. Yeah.
It's so funny.
He's obviously rapped before. Lazy Sunday, classic.
I would say that Lazy Sunday, if we were doing a Spotify Wrapped when I was, I don't want to say what age, that would be my number one song of the year when it came out. 100%. It was my favorite. We'll talk about Rick and Morty a little bit more, but to talk about other music that you make, I was listening to another wonderful interview you did, and you dropped the biggest bomb of all time I've ever heard, which is that you made the theme song to Wizards of Waverly Place. And I screamed out loud. That blew my mind in a way I don't think I've ever experienced before, which I know sounds so silly, probably because you're like, yeah, it was a Disney Channel song. But that song is iconic. It's incredible. It's so hilarious that that's just you, Ryan. What is the fucking process of making a Disney Channel theme song? What the hell?
Well, so my bosses at Emoto had a separate company called Hampton Adair. It was Steve Hampton and John Adair. They did music for TV show under that name. They did Just Shoot Me and a couple other network shows, but then they also had a good relationship with Disney, where they would submit main title themes. And Disney does a big shootout for their main titles. They probably listen to 50 songs for each one. And it's usually a big, complicated brief where they send you like a whole bunch of information about what songs they want to be influenced by and what they're looking for, or whatever. And so I, as a staff composer, was like, hey, like, let's have Elder do one, take a crack at it. And so we did, I think John and Steve and another composer there, Paul Bessenbacher, and I each did our own version. And then they probably got, like I said, 46 more from other composers. So it was always like such a crapshoot,
Yeah.
But that theme song, it's just one of those ones where it was like, as I was writing, I was like, oh shit, this is actually good. This might have a chance. The lyrics kind of like, there's one thing where I was like, I started it. Rarely did I get to work 2 days on a project back then. It was almost always like start the morning of, finish the night of on a project. But this one I got to take home and think about overnight. And I had this idea to do like, do you remember that like poem, One Dark Day in the Middle of the Night? Two dead boys got up to fight. Back to back, they faced each other. Have you ever heard this? It's like it's like an old poem where it, like every sentence is the opposite of what it's supposed to mean. And so I had this idea like, oh, what if I kind of played with that, but in the lyrics. But then I started there and it kind of formed into this other idea where it was like listing, what if you could do this? What if you could do that? And initially, I had my friend Jesse Moss, who's an awesome singer, sing the demo for it, thinking like, hey, if they like it, they'll use her voice. But it came back after they said, hey, we like this version. We want to do some revisions to it. And also, we want to hear what Selena sounds like on it.
When you were given the brief, were you given the brief of like, it's, teenage girl witch, it's Selena Gomez?
Oh, yeah. I've seen Selena Gomez was not famous yet, so nobody knew who she was.
She's not famous. She'd been in a couple Disney channels.
Yeah. I mean, if you were a Disney fan, you might know who she was, but like she was not Selena Gomez yet, that's for sure.
No, she was only in The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and Hannah Montana a little bit.
Yeah. So, and I was like, well, hopefully she can sing. It's so strange to think that about Selena Gomez, this is #1 Billboard hit, Selena Gomez. But at the time it was like, she's 15, who knows, like if she can pull out. And I was like really in love with this version that Jesse did. And they had one lyric note, which in retrospect is like the most embarrassing thing ever. But the line, you can write a report on a book you never read. Originally, for some reason, my dumb brain was like, forgot the word report. And I had it as you can write an essay on a book you've never read, which lyrically rhythmically doesn't even work. Yeah. And in retrospect, it was like a classic, almost seemed intentional red herring to like let them put a little bit of their stink on it too, by suggesting, hey, what if you use the word report here? What a great idea I had.
Oh, wow.
But it was actually a good idea. And I did not think of it. But that was one of the only lyric notes they had. And then Selena came in, and when her mom came in first, and I was like, oh, that's her. Because her mom was very, very young.
Yes.
And she was amazing, super pro, like absolutely nailed it. Like she was 15, so very new to the business, like, she wasn't jaded or anything. And I mean, I have no reason to believe that she would be now, but my point is like, she was an absolute pro. For 15, it was like, okay, I could see why this girl's like Disney's wonder kid.
Why she's picked. I mean,
Yeah.
I wanted, Ryan, I wanted to be on Disney Channel so bad when I was a kid. I wanted to be like the lead of a sitcom. And I think it's so funny now because in my head, I was like, well, yeah, it's because I was quirky and fun. But no, these kids are so professional. Like they're so media trained. They're so given these parameters to like you have to be all of these things to even remotely qualify for being the lead of a Disney Channel sitcom.
Yeah.
And of course, one of them is singing. Funny enough, I feel like you can't sing. They're like, no, we don't want you. Everyone's got to have a music career.
I mean, it feels like it's such a bonus requirement. I don't know what it's like now over there, but you know, I never got another Disney main title, but the company that I worked for did several. They did Bunked. They did Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, both versions. They did Phil of the Future. Like we got a bunch there.
Such good songs. Oh,
they're pretty good. Like, yeah, actually Paul Bessenbacher, he got several. He got Bunked and I think Phil of the Future. So it was always like I did ones for all of those, and they never picked mine again. But it's funny because I sort of forgot about that show because it stopped airing on Disney, so I stopped seeing royalties for it. And it just was like, didn't really realize how all of the people who loved it when they were kids grew up and now have agency and are like adults. And so one of the biggest surprises I ever had was I was doing a panel at WonderCon and I just casually mentioned that I did with the Wizards theme, thinking like, whatever, it's not important. It's the past. And the crowd, like the gasp from the crowd was so shocking to me. It's still weird to me that like I'm tooting my own horn, but it's still weird to me that is resonant. I think it's it's the most famous piece of music I've ever written. I think it's probably been heard by more people than the Rick and Morty theme. If I had
I think as years go by and Rick and Morty puts out more episodes, I think that might the curve might might overtake. Those YouTube videos that are like the most popular X of whatever time, and it's like a bar graph going up and then going back down. Well, on IMDb, you're listed as the composer. Is it just the theme song? Were you doing other music for the show or just the theme song?
I mean, I did do a lot of the interstitial cues, the little 3-second, because it was a sitcom. So again, we have just like I had to write like 23-second cues every year. They initially were just going to have a theme song and then someone else was going to score the show. But when they heard my theme song, they're like, oh, we want the whole sound of the show to be based on this. So they came to us to do that. And so it was like a lot of accordion, that little thing. That was like me playing on accordion. And we used that versions of that little melody for like all of the transitions and how to make it, how do you do 50 different versions of that are 3 seconds long? You just start is how you do it. So yeah, a lot of the music was written by me or one of the other composers, owners at Hampton Adair. We each would do like 20 for each season, and then they would have like 60 to pull from. And there's a few specialty cues that I did, dance music in the background, stuff like that.
Classic. I don't know if you saw this. There was a trend on TikTok for a while where the Hannah Montana interstitials would be used. Somebody basically put them all together, and then the sort of explaining a TikTok meme over not showing it, but that the idea would be that like if one of the cues was happy, like people would be ranking something. So like, oh, this is a 7 out of 10. This is a happy cue. This is a 2 out of 10. This is the sad cue. And I think that to the point where I think they did interviews with the Hannah Montana composer for the same reason. People had such a nostalgia for it. And then it kind of got a second wind for some reason, which I think is so funny. When you're working on a show like Wizards of Waverly Place, it's really just outside of maybe something that you would typically watch. Or I assume that you were not watching Disney Channel at that time. Do you ever check in to see how it's used, or you just kind of say whatever happens? I don't really. Do you ever watch to see how your music was being used?
I watched a few episodes for sure. And obviously I would watch as the music editor was placing cues and stuff. I would see what was going on from his perspective, because we worked in the same office. We're friends, you know, we're going out to lunch all the time, stuff like that. So it was, I knew, I was aware. I've worked on other shows, mostly as a ghostwriter, where you're working through another composer and your music is going in and maybe you're getting credit, but most likely you're not. That happens a lot. And I've hired ghostwriters before, not on Rick and Morty, but other stuff. And those ones, it's like, I won't watch the show. And sometimes the composer will be like, hey, do you watch the show? You might want to watch and see how your music's being used before you start working on other cues. I've had that. I've gotten that note before. Because it's like, who has the time, right? If it's a show that you're not interested in watching, like I'll watch my scenes and I kind of know what I need to do for my scenes or whatever. But like the bigger picture, if I don't need to know it, I'm not gonna watch the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, for Wizards, I think certainly in the beginning I would watch the whole episodes because I wanted to see how the music was going to fit or whatever. But then there was someone else overseeing all that, so they just told me what they needed. And you know, I wasn't actually the composer of credit on that show. I did get credit for the main title, but it was like I shared it with 3 other people, and the composers of credit were Steve Hampton and John Adair, and they did the vast majority of the overseeing the creative work, and they managed me mostly from my point of view. So it's a different situation when you're employed by someone or ghostwriting or whatever you want to say than it is when you're the main person.
So back to Rick and Morty, where you have a little more creative control. Just back to Rick and Morty, something else I wanted to talk about was situations where you are doing covers or there's music in the show that is not composed by you. So for music that is not composed by you, like actual music cues, I assume there's a music supervisor and you don't have anything to do with that. Are you ever contributing like, oh, I think maybe we could use this actual song here? In a scene or in a cue?
There is not a music supervisor. It's primarily handled. That creative is usually decided by the writer of the episode, or Harmon or someone is like, let's use this song here. You're talking about needle drop primarily stuff.
Yeah, needle drops. Yeah, exactly.
Or if in the case of a cover too, that was in the script. When we just did a cover of Live Forever, the Oasis song, that was in the script. It literally spelled it out. Like Heather, who wrote the episode, was like, an acoustic cover of Live Forever starts playing, cue montage, whatever. So that was always going to be there. And they just like, the producer is usually negotiating the rights to that stuff. And so we don't have a music supervisor or a music editor on Rick and Morty. That's pretty typical for animation, which is what I think. Not all animation. We had a supervisor and an editor on Inside Job, but that's sort of a more modern approach. Like animation typically does not have all those extra roles very often. So I have never pitched a song for an episode. So, you know, occasionally I'll get emails of people who are like, hey, I wrote this song. I think it would be good in the show. And I'm like, you're barking up the wrong tree. But I did occasionally, if we need like background music or something, I'll in season 1, my brother-in-law's group, The Hood Internet, we licensed a couple of his songs for like party music because I was like, hey, we can get a good deal on this. And it's just background music. It's not, you know, it's not telling a story or anything. But for the most part, every needle drop song you hear has been pretty well decided on before I even see the animatic.
So making a cover of a song, I feel like is when I put it together that it was not only this actual Oasis song, but it was like, oh, it's you and your collaborator, your friend covering it. What is that experience like? Like covering a song, I feel like is very stressful. That was always my interpretation of it. When you're doing a song that has been done before and by a very popular band such as Oasis.
Well, the pressure for any sort of big montage song is on for sure. Like I need those songs to be good. I want people to go, "What the hell is that?" and Shazam it, you know. So for even if it's original or a cover, whatever, the pressure's definitely on for those. But a cover is easier than an original because it's already written. I just have to figure out fun ways to make it my own. And actually, Lauren and I, our first pass on that Live Forever cover was way more intimate. It was very like Phoebe Bridgers, folklore, Taylor Swift kind of a vibe, finger picky and real. I use this rubber bridge guitar I have, and it was like real intimate. And Lauren sang like really breathy and intimate, just like very close to the mic. And it wasn't the right approach. Like both creatively and like for us, it was like, ooh, this is what we want to do. These are in what we're the kind of music we're interested in. But it wasn't the right approach because it lost some of that gravitas that the original song has. So we went back to, they heard it, they were like, hey, can you do a version that's a little more has a little more edge to it, a little more energy. And so we did more of a strummy guitar thing, and she sang out more, much more. She belted a little more, and it ended up being the right call in retrospect. But I have that intimate version on my computer, and I love it, and it's special to me. But it'll probably never see the light of day.
Just a file on the computer forever. Don't let it be lost media though, like your old songs.
I back everything up. Back it up from Sunday for sure.
How are you delivering music for an episode when you have to give over files? Is it edited to the animatic and it's individual MP3s, waves? What are you giving when you're handing over the music you've created?
Yeah, it's a timeline in Pro Tools, wave files, sometimes stems. Rick and Morty, not that many stems, but other shows, full stems.
Yeah.
And it's all locked to timing, to the latest cut, which often changes, and then I have to send another version. But I delivered it to the mix house, Margarita Mix, where they mix the episode. Well, I don't know if it might be Photochem now. Anyways, their brand keeps changing, but we send it to mix, and then it's all mixed over the internet now. We do a remote session, which thank God for the pandemic and that specific area only. Because I used to go to mixes and I'd drive to Hollywood and go to the mix, and it was fun because there weren't that many people, but now there's lots of people involved. It would be a nightmare doing a mix in person. So we get to all just hop online and everybody's in their own place, and it goes well. But pre-pandemic, that wasn't even really an option. I mean, it might've been, but most people just didn't do it.
Music is obviously, you want to hear everything as deep as possible, as loud as possible. You want the best setup. Do you have certain tech that you're using? Like, okay, I need these headphones when I'm listening to a mix. I mean, coming through Zoom, audio quality is always so tricky. Are there very specific technology items that you have that you think are necessary for making sure that you're delivering the best product?
Yeah, I mean, I have good speakers. I don't use speakers a lot, just because I find headphones I can hear the detail better for whatever reason. But I just have these. They're prosumer, buy them at Guitar Center or something.
Yeah.
But they're good. They sound good. They're comfortable. That's key because I'm wearing them for hours on end. It's always good to get a second opinion, or if I really want a song to sound amazing or a cue, I'll bring it out to my car and listen there just to get a second. But for the most part, I just use those headphones and it works. I'm not like a lot of people are big gear people and have rooms and rooms of gear. Like I don't have I have a very small studio compared, as you could see, like if you look at like Hans Zimmer's studio or Junkie XL, it's like walls and walls of synths. And I have these ones that I don't even plug in. Like I don't use a lot of gear. I'm not a big, I'm a very in the box kind of guy, and that's just how I like to compose. And it's faster and easier, and whatever.
Yeah. Who on the post-production team do you find yourself working with because I'm sure you're working with writers, I'm sure you're working with, EPs, but is there anybody in post that you find that you're like contacting so much? Me and the post-production supervisor on the show I work on, we're like two peas in a pod at this point because I have to email her for everything. Who in post are you often connecting with?
I get the cuts directly from the editors, so I interface with the editors a lot, and then I also work with the line producer a lot in terms of like delivery, schedule, and all that.
Yeah.
Creatively, it's mostly the writer of the episode. They give a lot of creative power to, and then the showrunner, Scott Martyr, like I said, and there's other producers that are involved that will give input sometimes here and there too. It's changed over the years. In the early beginning, it was like creatively, I was mostly only getting feedback from Justin and Dan.
Yeah.
And I would interface mostly with Justin in terms of delivery and stuff, but also the line producer, Mike Mendel, who passed away between seasons 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And the other producer, Sydney, who now works on Solar Opposites. Mm-hmm. So it's a different situation now, different people and stuff, but mainly those people.
Yeah, the show is a very nebulous and like ever expanding thing, especially as seasons go on. Yeah. I think some people think, oh, well, isn't this show done the same way for years and years and years? And every year you're, I think, changing a little bit, or different people get hired. I think people don't realize that.
We couldn't do it the way we did in the beginning. It's just it wasn't feasible. I mean, it took us 2 years to make a season. Between season 3 and 4 was literally almost 3 years. Like, it was so long. That's insane. It can't be that way. There needs to be it. For me, I know it was like so much better when we got like this strong team who was like dedicated to getting the show out once a year. Now the strike screwed that up. The next season isn't coming out until 2025.
Yeah.
But we were on a one season a year schedule for seasons 5, 6, and 7, because of this like dedication to this new team of like people who were like, actually focused on it and let's get it out, and not kind of willy-nilly throwing it together like we did in the past. It was more rock and roll in the beginning, which was fun. And like and almost the entire writing staff for season 1 was all friends of Dan and Justin. So that's why it was all men too, unfortunately. And a lot of friends of mine too, who wrote on season 1 and even 2 a little bit. But now it's more, it's serious business. So people take it a little more seriously in terms of like delivering on time and, getting it done.
Absolutely. It changed. It grows. And also I think expectations grow. And also I'm sure for Adult Swim, it becomes such a tentpole of their brand and what they're doing that suddenly it's like, hey, we need this because it's driving a lot of traffic.
I mean, the reruns do well, obviously, but they don't do as well as new episodes. So they, of course they want new episodes.
When you're making music for a show or a theme song, are you sort of cutting a deal of like, hey, just pay me for the theme song? Or are you getting those residuals and royalties for as long as that show is on the air? How are you, how do you produce that for yourself of saying like, do I want this front or back end? I guess I'm very curious about being a freelancer in that way.
The way it works for everyone, for all composers, is generally you get an upfront per episode fee. And then you get royalties based on how often it airs. Mm-hmm. And those royalties are collected by a PRO, performing rights organization. The big ones are BMI, ASCAP, CSAC.
I have made music cue sheets and I hate them all.
Yeah, cue sheets are one of the most annoying parts of being a composer for sure. A lot of people outsource it. But QDB does it, outputs to Rapid Q automatically. It's amazing. Anyways, beautiful. That's super inside baseball. But that's
music cue sheets. That's what this podcast is for. It's to say, fuck music cue sheets.
Oh yeah, but they get me paid. They get me
it's
royalties.
True.
So I don't, and the royalties are collected based on how often it airs, how long the queue is, all sorts of metrics that I don't really fully understand. But your Performing Rights Society, I said PRO, I meant PRS, Performing Rights Society, in my case, BMI, chases down everyone who airs the episode all over the world and collects the royalties on my behalf. Then they take a cut and they send me a check. So it's nice. It's a nice little bonus, and if the show's a huge hit, you reap the rewards that way. So,
the PRS is like, when I have to do manual cue sheets sometimes, Ryan, it's a nightmare going to like BMI's website and like searching the track from like the file that the editor sends me of just the EDL. Miserable. But I'm glad that I support artists and I want them to get paid. I just hate that it's my job to do it.
Yeah. I do my own on Rick and Morty. I've had the music editor do it on other shows. Ultimately, I know for me, it's great because I know that, hey, this is going to get me paid. But if I wasn't getting anything for it, I hate doing them and I know that they're getting me paid. So I can't imagine doing them without any skin in the game.
That's pretty, the skin in the game I have is I'll get fired if I don't do
that, right? Fair enough.
Yeah. But I'm still resentful of them at all times. Ryan, when it comes to, I think, the creative process, creating is amazing. Being blocked up and being stuck on ideas is so miserable. Do you have a actual process when you're making music? I remember you said that you try and write like 2 minutes of music a day, or you're just trying to write every day. How are you creating and keeping yourself in a space where you're not getting stuck? And do you ever get stuck and just?
It's so funny. I do get this question a lot because I think people do struggle with it a lot. I think for me, especially because my job and livelihood and career depend on doing music on time and in tune, I don't even worry about not being inspired. Inspiration is not relevant to what I do. Sometimes I write a cue and I'm like, this is bad, but hey, I'm still delivering it because I'd rather deliver something bad on time than nothing at all, or something good late. Something bad on time to me is better than something good late. It just is. I think you need to be reliable. And so I don't wait for inspiration. Inspiration doesn't factor in. I do get inspired and it's awesome and it's fun when I'm writing a cue and I'm like, ooh, this is great. That's fun, but it's like, that's just the icing on the cake. Like I still have to make the cake, So my advice is the same advice I got from my college composition professor, which is you can't wait for inspiration. You have to just start writing. You just have to do something. Even if it's bad, it's better to do something bad. So luckily, after 22 years of composing, I just checked the date, 23 years composing now, almost, I don't need inspiration anymore. I can at least even when I'm uninspired and making bad stuff for me, it's probably still passable. But when early on, I definitely made bad cues or bad music for commercials early on. Like I can think of a few where I'm like, Jesus, why did they let me do this? But I did something. It's better to do something than nothing. So I'd rather do something bad than nothing. And that's how you get good. You have to make bad stuff. You have to be okay with making bad stuff or you'll never make good stuff.
100%. Again, I think it goes back to what we were talking about, Channel 101, of you have to take the risk. You have to take a leap of I'm just going to keep making. And if it's bad, it's okay. You make something else. And if it's good, okay, you make something else. Yeah, that's also the nature of this industry too, is, you're going to put it on a new episode and it's going to be great, but you have to put out another new episode. You have to make something else because
it's even worse now. It's even worse now when you put out a whole season in one day and the hype lasts maybe 5 days. And then you're like, okay, what do I got to do next? Like, how do I get this buzz again from people being excited about my work? It's like the Netflix shows that I worked on, especially Inside Job. It was like, we were so excited for it to come out. We're hyping it up the day it comes out. And then no one is talking about it 5 days later. Like, just nothing. That's it. It's over. And it's like all of this work, years and years, literally years of work, only for it to just flash super brightly for 5 days and then it's done.
Yeah.
And that's
I know it very well. It's so tough.
Episodic is slightly better. You at least like get a slow drip of excitement about your stuff. And I'm very fortunate to be in a position where the music I make is getting put in front of eyeballs where people can get excited about it. Definitely
right. Eyeballs and not ears.
Yeah. Or ears, whatever, earballs. So, I know I'm lucky in that sense. A lot of people are making music that doesn't get heard. But it is like you work so hard on something, you expect like people to like it longer than 5 days, but that's just how it works. People are on to the next thing. So you got to be on to the next thing too.
Do you have a favorite, like a favorite sound instrument, like that you love to use or incorporate into the music that you make for Rick and Morty? There are some favorite instruments.
Yeah. I mean, so the sound of the show has changed a lot over the years. If you listen to season 1 compared to now, it's a lot synthier. It's a lot more produced, a lot of more electronic elements. But 2 sounds that I will use from episode 1 until the very last episode we do 100 years from now will be the gong, the sound of a gong, because it just adds the mystery that a cymbal doesn't. And French horns, like the melodies are going to be carried by French horns. They're carrying the melodies. The second part of the melody in the theme song is like French horns mixed with synth. I used to use theremin a lot. I find it limiting because it's in the main title. So you'd think I'd want it in a bunch of cues and stuff, but I find it a little limiting. So I don't use it that much anymore.
Yeah.
I like to use, French horn and gong will be in every cue almost, as long as the show's on.
If anybody's listening and your kid, I don't know who this would be. I have no idea my audience this would be. But if your kid is about to start learning an instrument, get them on the French horn, because nobody plays the French horn. And I think it is like one of the most, melodically featured instruments besides like a trumpet and like an oboe. But God bless oboe players. Get your students started on the French horn right away, because they could actually become
if they want to play for orchestras that play on movies, French horn it's very in vogue. It'll probably change. But right now, French horns are very, very popular. And as the melodic instrument in film scores for sure. So French horn, good place to start.
Ryan, I just to wrap things up, what are some of the insert media here? I know there's way too much, just like, I can't even say movies, TV, there's too much. What are some of the things that you have a lot of respect for, or that you really think are amazing productions that maybe don't get spotlight, or people wouldn't know that you are just like such a fan of, whether that's music or just media in general, productions that you kind of admire?
I don't watch a lot of movies, but for TV, I watch a ton of TV. I mean, I like all sorts of shit. Are you talking just musically, like composer wise, or just overall?
Yeah, I think artistically, anything that really.
I mean, we're watching season 5 of Fargo right now. After season 2, I definitely thought it was the best show on TV. I still think it's very good. But a lot has happened. A lot has come out since then. Big fan of, Only Murders in the Building. Amazing. We mentioned that earlier. I don't know. There's too many shows to list off here, but I think Righteous Gemstones is probably my favorite show right now. It's just so consistently amazing. I actually know people who were like set dressers on the latest season, and we were talking about it, and I just was like geeking out so hard on how much I love that
job.
film. I know. Cool. They we're talking about the chair. There's like a chair that's heavily featured in that one of the characters makes for another character. And they got to like design that chair. And I was like, oh my God, the chair. It was like the chair was like a character. I was so excited. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff.
Amazing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That covers it for now.
Yeah. People do not watch the Righteous Gemstones enough, I got to say.
They also don't need a list of shows to watch from me. They got their own gigantic lists, I'm sure.
Yeah. Everyone's got to catch up on the Traitors, of course.
Of course.
It starts there and trickles down. No. Ryan, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Such a privilege to get to chat more about what you actually do, because I think it's amazing and such a wonderful world to peek into. So thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
What do you want people to do? To follow you? To listen to music? What's the tea here?
They don't have to do anything.
Great. You're free of your obligations, listener. Don't worry.
Yeah, I don't need. You can follow me if you want on Twitter or whatever. But I don't. Whatever. Not important. I'm not in.
Yeah.
I'm not. I know I'm supposed to care about my social media following, but I don't. So.
Well, you know what? I wrote this down in my notes, and I had it covered up for a while. Maybe the one thing they should do is stream Snake Jazz so that they can get a $50 donation from you.
I did do that this year. Every year I say anyone who has Snake Jazz at the top of their Spotify Wrapped, I will donate $50 to their charity. I found someone on Reddit this year who didn't have Snake Jazz, but they did have human music, which is maybe even worse, less
yeah,
as their number one. And they weren't even trying to get the donation, but I messaged them and I was like, who do you want me to donate money to? This is close enough. And they're like, oh, really? And so I donated $50 to like a dog shelter in Illinois or something. And I was happy to. So yeah, I may have to put a limit on how many people I'll do this for, but I can't imagine anyone's going to put up with Snake Jazz that much. So we'll see. But I am true to my word.
Of course, he sticks by it. So next year, it's February, get the streams in, and then, you could turn it around for yourself.
There you go.
Exactly. Well, I just want to say, thank you. If you're listening, make sure a 5-star Apple review, I think, would be the nicest thing in the world, because I read them like every 6 months and it makes me feel better about doing this. So I think that's what you should do.
Yeah. Instead of following me, just do that. Follow Naomi, give 5 stars on the podcast.
I've got a lot of links and a lot of descriptions, and listen to the other episodes because they've also been really fun. We talked to fellow Minnesotan David Haba at Taskmaster, Minnesota, and talked to recently Anders about Survivor Maryland. We'll talk off mic about it. Okay. But thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Yep. Have a great whatever time of day it is. Bye.
Bye.